does the Trump corridor enhance U.S. strategic interests in the South Caucasus?
Well, if this deal works, and at the moment it's not a deal, it's more like a deal points memo, it would certainly reduce the influence of the Iranians and the Russians after more than 30 years of warfare and conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It provides an opportunity to also interfere with the Chinese plans to build a railway, freight railway that would run from Shanghai into the EU. And so if it works, this would be
What do you
a
mean
good
by
thing
if it works? What do you mean by if it works and it's a memo? What do you mean?
Well, there is no signed formal agreement here. Baku, for instance, has said that Armenia must amend its constitution for this to take place. Trump needs to get the approval of the American Congress, which I'm pretty sure he would get. But
what I meant here is it an agreement that will be signed, or is it just an idea that floated?
Well, you called it, I thought, pretty reasonably a preliminary agreement.
All right.
But, Donald Trump is always
an MOU,
counting
you mean?
eggs before they hatch.
Mr. Osman, how would Russia interpret the emergence of the Trump corridor in South Caucasus at this very precise time and stage?
Thank you for having me, Mona. Greetings to you and to your honorable guest and your dear audience. Of course, the peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, brokered by the United States, is basically a huge blow to Russian influence in an area which was historically part of Russia's sphere of influence. The South Caucasus historically most of it was part of Tsarist Russia. It was definitely part of the Soviet Union. And since even independence of both countries after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the two countries were to some varying degrees under Russian influence. The entire Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia was basically mediated by the Russians. And since the mid-1990s, the Russians have actively frozen the conflict up until the year 2020, when the second Nagorno-Karabakh war happened. And this time, unlike in 1992, in the early 1990s, Azerbaijan emerged victorious and was able to seize back some parts of Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh, as the Armenians call it, which is basically an Armenian majority enclave inside internationally recognized territories of Azerbaijan. Since then, the Russians have again, along with the Turks, frozen the conflict once more. However, this time, the Americans had other ideas, and there were several factors that led to this, including a government change in Armenia a few years back, which led to the rise of Nikol Pashinyan. He's a prime minister who is very much more oriented towards the West than he is towards Russia, the traditional ally of Armenia. So he did not have any problems pivoting to the Western side. And in the peace agreement with Azerbaijan that was brokered by the United States, Armenia basically presented all the necessary concessions and the needed concessions by the Azeri side, including the idea of the Zangezur corridor, which will basically link Nakhchivan, or I hope I'm pronouncing it right, exclave of Azerbaijan, to mainland Azerbaijan through Armenian territories. And it's quite interesting because this corridor, which will basically, according to the memo signed along with the peace agreement, will be exclusively granted for the United States for economic investment and coordination and even regulation. There is talk that there might be U.S. military personnel on the ground at some point in order to manage the corridor which runs through Armenian territory from one part of Azerbaijan to the other. The more interesting part, even, Mona, in this is that this corridor falls directly on the Iranian-Armenian border. Iran and Armenia have enjoyed a rather close relationship Of course, I think now this will be put into questions. The Iranians were very.
We'll get to that, Mr. Osman.
Yes, but Job, my last point about it is a huge blow to an area that has been traditionally a Russian sphere of influence, where Russia has been the arbiter and the main mediator of conflicts, and even the one who orchestrated the conflicts. Right now, the United States has completely replaced Russia and sidelined it entirely in this calculus.
That was the question, Dr. Osman. That was the question, and that was the importance. And the timing of that is very, very interesting. Let me get back to you, Mr. Osman, and to Mr. Johnson. What is the significance of the U.S. securing a 99-year lease and exclusive development rights for the corridor?
Well, if you're going to not open a direct connection between the two parts of Azerbaijan, you've got to come up with some alternative. And so creating this U.S.-controlled zone would enable that. It has for Donald Trump the benefit that he's got another set of deals he can make that will end up enriching his family. That's what he's been doing around the world, making deals to enrich his family, as I wrote about in one of my books on Donald Trump. And the 99 years is often seen in business deals as a way to secure your ground rent, your control of the ground for a very long period of time, so you can justify investments in buildings, roads, rail lines, and other infrastructure.